morning. My name is Dave Zybert. I'm a local actor-director. I do a lot of different things. I used to work, I'm not a software developer, although I used to, for 13 years, I was the web design manager for Great Basin Internet Services, which is the local internet service provider. So I do have some sympathy for what all you guys do all the time. And it's very appreciated because having worked with a lot of the, having worked with software developers, it's kind I kind of sympathize with your job because you have so many people you have to listen to sometimes, and it can be very confusing. Anyway, I wanted to start by saying I'm not really into PowerPoint. This is probably the first PowerPoint presentation I've ever had to present. So I managed to make a couple of slides. The first one that I did, I'm very proud of. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very, yeah. First I figured out how to make a start page. Then I had to go out on the internet and I found a YouTube video that gave me very precise instructions on how to embed a YouTube video into a PowerPoint presentation. And I was very proud of myself that I actually managed this. We're going to see how this works. We're going to watch this clip. This is from a movie from the 1960s. I'm sure you will recognize the star. But when I was asked to do this speech, when Sue Picotta asked me to do this speech, she said, taking the fear out of public speaking, this was absolutely the very first thing that came to mind. So anyway, this clip is from The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, which came out in 1965, Universal Studios Pictures, to give credit where credit is due. And he starts out by, I'm sure anybody who's familiar with Don Knotts knows, he shakes the paper in front of the microphone and he sets the speech down and it blows away, and just all kinds of things happen to him. And after that, I was going to show you my really terrific third slide, which is that. And that was about where I lost interest in doing PowerPoint, so that's the interest. And now I'm really less interested in doing PowerPoint. So we'll just go on. What are some of the errors that occur when you give a speech? What? Jiggling, you're doing it or the speaker's doing it? The speaker's jiggling change in his pocket. Drives you nuts, doesn't it? Anybody else? Anything else? You forget your lines. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to forget your lines because that isn't as big a deal as you might suspect. Anybody else? What do speakers do that either make you nervous or that you might perceive? Yeah. They walk out of the spotlight when you're, and I don't have a spotlight here. I'm usually pretty good at finding my key light because actors have to do that. Anything else? And well, or they do what I do, which is hold the mic like this, and I have a tendency to pop my peas. It's one of the things that I do wrong. Yes. Talk too fast is a very good one, and we're going to talk about that one later. Any others? Ums and ahs? Yes. That's another one that you find people do it to a point where you can almost, you know, you can be listening to them and go bumpty bumpty bump, bumpty bumpty bump, bumpty, and it goes on and on. Toastmasters is good for that. They have something called an meter when people give speeches, and you'll notice I say from time to time because I'm winging it. I don't know exactly. I have all these cards that have all my notes on them, but I like to talk. One of the things I was getting to, I don't like to memorize. I like to speak, not off the cuff, because I do have notes, but I like to speak in my own words because I find that I tend to come across more naturally and in a tone of voice that makes more sense for me. I started at age 6 doing commercials, and I think one was for cereal and one was for shoes. And it was in Southern California. They were in black and white. They don't exist anymore. Don't look for them because you won't find them. No, I was not Mikey. Actually, I'm far younger than Mikey. I actually remember watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show when they were on for the first time. So that gives you an idea of how long I've been doing this. I just celebrated my 50th year entertaining or in show business, or however you want to call it, because some people don't call what I do entertaining. Let's start with who is afraid to speak in front of a group of people? You don't have to be. Are you really? Okay. What is your biggest fear? You just don't. Is there any particular reason? Not comfortable. Okay. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. And by the way, you just spoke in front of a room full of people, and we appreciate it. Yeah. So we all have these fears. You just said you're not. I'm sorry. Remind me of your name again, sir. Rich. That's right. We met earlier. We met last night. I had a great time. Rich doesn't feel comfortable speaking in front of a room full of people, and it's just a matter of comfort. Is it like butterflies? Is it like you don't feel like your stomach's churning? No? Can you put a name to it? Nervous. Okay. Sue, you had your hand up? You're afraid you'll look stupid. Yeah. And that happens a lot with people. They get up in front of a group of people for the first time and their voice trembles because they suddenly look out at this room full of people and they say, uh-oh, everybody's looking at me. And I'm not going to come up with that, or I will come up, but only mention it briefly. They say that the fear of public speaking is, people fear that even more than they fear death. And there was a famous comic one time that said, so actually what that boils down to is, in the case of a eulogy, you'd rather be in the box than speaking in front of the podium. And the other thing we're going to throw out right now, we're not even going to come close to it. I am not going to say that when you come out and speak in front of a room full of people, picture them all in their underwear. You've heard that one. Picture them all naked. Picture them all in their underwear. I'm here to tell you, there are rooms full of people that I would not want to see either naked or in their underwear, and that's why I don't tell people to do it. The biggest reason that I don't use a standard thing like that is that everybody is different. Everybody learns, everybody works in their own way. Also, in public speaking, I'm standing up here as Dave, looking at you all, and I'm here I am, actor, 40 years, and I do all this talking. When I'm acting, I'm playing a character. I'm Mordred from Camelot, or Roger Sherman from 1776, or Victor Velasco from Barefoot in the Park, some of the roles I've played. But when you're coming up here to do a speech, you don't have a character. Some people talk about hiding behind a character. You don't have a character to hide behind. You're coming up here as yourself. That's one of the biggest differences between public speaking and acting. And sometimes that idea that, oh, it's me up here is what's most frightening, because you're afraid of, like Sue said, afraid of looking foolish, your voice starts to quiver and so forth. I started a series of 8-week acting classes with a friend of mine named Jackie Fisher. We found that we've both been in the business a long, long time. When I went through my theatrical training, I learned what's called just straight technique, or what Jimmy Cagney referred to as, you walk through the door, you plant your feet, you look the other fella in the face, and you tell the truth. Spencer Tracy put it much simpler. Learn your lines and don't trip over the furniture. That was his whole theory of acting, and he won 3 Oscars. So I think it's pretty good. And that was what I learned, was what's called straight technique. Jackie went to the South Coast Rep, which is in Southern California, and they taught straight method acting, which is what Dustin Hoffman does, and Meryl Streep, and some of the other great actors. They do what's called the method, where you draw upon your life experiences to create a character, and it is far deeper and far more intensive. The biggest difference is between Jackie and I, when we work together, she stands backstage and she looks at her script and she is doing sense memory, and she's getting deeper and deeper into her character so that by the time the curtain goes up, she can walk on and be her character. I can be yakking with somebody right up until it's my cue, and excuse me a second, and I walk on stage and I'm in character. And there's nothing wrong with what either one of us do. It's just different ways of getting to the same place. So that's why when I started with this whole idea of picture everybody in their underwear, I said, no, you know, that's not going to work for everybody. And I remembered my acting classes, and I said, everyone here in this room is going to have to take away something from what I say today that's going to work for them. So I'm going to give you a few things to help you out. And you don't have to use all of them. Just use the ones that work for you. Now we're going to talk about, what was your name, sir? Jeff. When Jeff had that demo go wrong, the first thing that happened is this inner voice started in his head. And we all have this inner voice. When I clicked on that thing and the movie played, but there was no sound, the inner voice said, yeah, you look like a real idiot up here, don't you, Zybert? Does anybody here not want to admit to an inner voice? We'll start with them. No. Okay. Everybody's got an inner voice. And the moment you stand up in front of a group of people and you look up and you stare at them, that inner voice starts. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, whose inner voice is a 1 to 3? Real low. Just little stuff. 4 to 6. Okay. About the medium-sized inner voice. 7 to 10. Okay, these are the people who are most likely to have trouble with public speaking, because that inner voice starts up and starts talking to you, and pretty soon you're going, is he texting? She's not paying attention. Is he asleep? And that's what the inner voice is saying, and pretty soon you're completely off task. You're worrying about everything around you. In acting, we call it getting inside your own head. You're inside your own head. You're not projecting out. You're not on task, and you're certainly not performing. And part of the problem is getting rid of that inner voice. Or at least getting it down, kind of stamping it down a little bit so that it isn't bothering you as much. How do you do that? Tip number 1. And all of these things pretty much have to do with confidence. And it's confidence you can give yourself. First of all, you have confidence in your subject. Dick? Danny. If someone were to ask you to give a speech, what would they most likely ask you to give a speech on? Yeah, see, I knew that because we've talked before. Identity theft. And it's something you know. Yeah, and you're passionate about it. So if someone asks you to speak, you can probably walk into a room and do 35 minutes without notes, without even thinking about it. You're confident in your subject matter. So we'll start there. One of the best ways to to speak in public without fear is to be confident in your subject matter. Know what you're talking about. Now, in a situation like this, you're not likely to be asked to speak unless your peers recognize that you have something to tell them. I heard somebody the other day say, "Oh yeah, I've got to go to somebody's speech because his content is always great." You guys are very big into content and content providing. So you understand the principles of good content. And when you ask a speaker up here, you have a pretty good idea that they're going to speak on something and give you something in return. And one of the things that the speaker can take with them is, I know my subject. I can do 10 minutes of questions and answers. Nobody's going to, and I feel reasonably confident that I can give a good answer to that. So confidence in your subject matter. Let me make sure I hit everything I wanted to hit on that. And what you were going to say, or what you said earlier, it's not necessary to memorize. Some people memorize their speeches and they don't come across naturally because they have a speaking voice. They have a voice that they use when they're public speaking. And it's a little different and a little more stilted. And we are going to talk today about large green beetles and their effect on science, or whatever they're talking about. But it sounds stilted and it doesn't sound natural. If you feel confident memorizing your speech and coming across naturally, then by all means memorize. But you don't have to. I'm using, no big secret, 3x5 cards. By the way, I gave Tom the 3x5 cards, so these are all my notes. It's nothing, nothing earth-shattering, but it's something worthwhile. Tip number 2, confidence in your environment. I was a little remiss in that this morning. I came in here 15 minutes early. I set up my computer. I plugged it in. I made sure that it appeared on the screen. Clicked through, found my first slide, was happy with that. Checked my microphone. Microphone works. Found out where the water was, poured myself a glass of water, and in general, I should say, made myself comfortable in the room. I actually, at one point, just walked down the aisle, I didn't walk up the side, I couldn't have. No, but I did walk down the aisle and I came back up and made myself comfortable in the room. I turned on the microphone. I talked into it for a while to see what it sounded like coming over the speakers. I made myself comfortable in the space. Actors do this all the time. The first time an actor walks onto a stage in a new theater, they walk around. They walk around on the stage. They look for places on the stage that squeak. They will project into the audience to hear how it sounds. Even if they know they're going to be mic'd, they don't assume. They assume the mic's going to go out. Anyway, I made myself comfortable. I had my mouse pad where I wanted. I had my water where I wanted. I had my cards where I wanted. Had my presentation. It was up. The one thing I didn't check was the sound on the movie. Well, that's the way things go sometimes. But if you're confident in yourself and you're confident in what you're doing, you can say bye-bye video and just keep right on going, which is what we did this morning. And again, this is a level of confidence. So that's another way to take the fear out of public speaking. If at all possible, come into the room ahead of time, set yourself up, make yourself comfortable, because the more comfortable you are in your space, the more comfortable you will be doing your speech. Excuse me. Tip number 3, confidence in yourself. This is one of the really hard ones. But let me start with, whenever you are asked to make a speech, you're there because they want you there. You have to start by remembering that. You're there because they want you there. You have something to contribute, and they and they felt that it was worth saying to the whole group, which leads to the next one, which is confidence in your audience. Let me pick somebody up. You, sir. What's your name? Aaron. Aaron, when my movie went bad, how did you feel? Sorry for me. No, it's exactly the answer. He felt sorry for me. Why? Because the one thing to remember when you get up here and talk about anything, your audience is on your side. It's true in theater, and it's true in public speaking. Nobody wants to see you fail. When people walk in and sit down, we're going to see so-and-so, they're not usually thinking, hope he screws up. That's funny. And if you keep that in mind, if you have confidence in your audience, you're going to have a much easier time giving a public speech. Because they don't have the speech in front of them. If you mess up, if you forget to say something, nobody's ever going to know. When I went through radio school, I had my instructor said one day the unthinkable is going to happen. You're going to be sitting in front of an open mic in a radio station, and that word is going to come out of your mouth. He said, I don't have to tell you what that word is. That word is going to come out of your mouth. He said, now there are two things you can do about it. He said, the first thing you can do about it is stop and say, oh my gosh, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry I said that. The other is to just go on as if nothing had happened. Okay, who thinks I should stop and apologize? See, that was easy. Who thinks I should just go on? Yeah, and that is the correct answer. Because 50% of the people are going to be saying, did he say what I think he said? And the other 50% of the people are going to be going, did you hear what he said? And in either way, it's gone. It's in the past. You can't get it back. Just move on. But if you stop and apologize, then everybody knows what you did, and there can be repercussions. Because if you don't stop and apologize, your station manager can say later, hey, we got a phone call. Did you drop an F-bomb on the air? No. They must have heard something else. And it's gone, and 90% of the people never even cared. My acting instructor put it a different way. Screw up with confidence. He didn't use the word screw up. He said, screw up with confidence. He said, if you walk in to a scene and you've forgotten your line, say something, say anything, get the scene moving. You know where the scene has to go. You know what story you're telling. This is true in public speaking. You know what story you're telling. You know why you're up here, is to say whatever you have to say about whatever topic you've been asked to speak about. So go on. Say something. It's better to do that than just stop and stare at people. Because then they know you did. Then they know you lost your line. Then they know you screwed up. The only time that isn't valid, that piece of advice isn't valid, there's only one time that I've ever seen. Shakespeare. People go to performances of Shakespeare with the text in their hand and a flashlight, and they follow along. Some of them follow along because it's sometimes hard to follow the Shakespeare's iambic pentameter or some of his other writing styles. And it's easier for people to follow along with the text, and then they understand the story a little better, and they watch the show. And others are Shakespeare Nazis. And if you screw up so much as a line, they're going to let you know right after the performance. It's the only kind of performance that I've ever seen where the audience, and that is the only kind of person that I've ever seen that goes to a performance or a public speech and is looking for someone to screw up so that they can make a point of it, and that's Shakespeare. So, as long as you're not doing Shakespeare up here, you really don't have anything to worry about in that respect. You're probably going to do very easily or do very well at what you do. And now I have to check the time. Oh my gosh, 25 minutes left. One of the other things that's very helpful, I hate to say it, is breathing. Sometimes when people come up to public speak, their heart rate goes up, they start breathing more rapidly, and they end up hyperventilating, and it adds to their anxiety. It adds to the way to the fear that they have when they're making a speech. So, breathe. Breathe in and breathe out. There's nothing that can happen to you up here that is going to reflect on you permanently, and for the most part, people are going to love what you have to say. We were talking earlier about Bill Gates actually had one of his demos go bad at, wasn't it ISVCon in Las Vegas? Or Comdex, I should say. Yeah, he was at Comdex, he was introducing his brand new product, and it just failed to work. Well, Bill, as I recall, handed off the device to somebody else to work on, and he just kept on going. And I bet his inner voice was going, and I bet his breathing went up. But if you know your product, and if you have confidence in your product, and confidence in yourself, off you can go. Slow down. It's probably my biggest issue when I speak. I have a tendency to do what I call machine gunning. I get to talking real fast and I just keep going right on and on and on and on and on, and I just want to talk. I want to get it out. I want to talk about it, and I want to get this information out to you so fast that my 30-minute speech ends up being only about 12 and a half minutes because I talk so fast. There is, and we see it in acting all the time, it's actually what we call a rookie mistake in acting is talking too fast. You know your lines, you've got them memorized. Now, by golly, I'm going to go out, I'm going to say those lines, and I'm going to get them out of my mouth so fast, and then I'll know I've done it right. And then your mom tells you afterwards, since it was your first school play, "You talked so fast, honey, I couldn't understand a word you said." And that's a voice coming from 50 years ago, from my mom, when I did a live performance. So I've learned to slow down. And one of the ways that you can make yourself slow down is my next tip, which is probably one of the biggest, if I had to write down all of the notes that I've ever given to actors over the years, this is the biggest one. Make your mouth say the words. And I say it to actors all the time. When I'm standing up here, the closest person to me is, I don't know, what would you say, 12 feet away? 10, 12 feet away. I'm a horrible judge of distance. Everything is 10 feet away from me. Yes, I do, and it's part of my problem. I don't suck at golf, but I'm never going to play professionally, I can tell you that. I tell people when I join foursomes, I say, "Can I join you?" I say, "I suck, but I'm funny." So, but I don't swear, I don't break clubs because I didn't start golfing till I was like 51 years old. But yeah, I've had 2 operations on my left eye. I had something called exotropia, which my left eye was turned out. If you remember an actor from years ago named Marty Feldman. Marty Feldman had exotropia. His eye pointed out, and he never had it fixed, but it was part of his persona, his comic persona, so he never did. I've actually had 2 operations on my left eye to correct the exotropia, and it's fine. I see about 20/20 out of my right eye. I see about 20/30 out of my left eye, but my depth perception is terrible. And everything is 10 feet away. So that's why when I say this, how far away are we? Oh, about 10 feet. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, well, no, I'm not, I mean, I've lived with it for a long time, so it's not a big deal. But when I talk about make your mouth say the words, if I even overemphasize my lip movements, from someone sitting as close as he is, it may look just a tiny bit overdone. But from somebody like Sue sitting in the back of the room, I can actually overmodulate my mouth as much as I want, and it really doesn't look unusual to her at all. And if you're in a huge room, if you're ever asked to speak in a huge room of 300 or 400 people, and you have the nice teleprompter there that has your speech there, I would advise before you go up, stand off to one side or stand somewhere quiet and just do facial exercises, something like this. And really get the muscles going. And then when you walk up, breathe, slow down, make your mouth say the words. Because we've all had to sit through speeches where the guy, I loved what he had to say, but he talked so fast and he slurred his words, I only got about 50% of it. And I loved what I heard, but I didn't understand half of it. Another thing, if you get into, and it's a good idea anyway, not even if you get into a pinch, smile a lot. Be friendly. You never believe how much emphasis you make on everything you do if you smile while you speak. If you're in a pleasant frame of mind while you speak. And the best way to do that is to smile. Your speeches will go so much better. And then if you put all of that together, you'll have a recipe for success and taking the fear out of public speaking. Does any of this make sense? Okay. Any questions so far? Yes.
I have a comment, actually.
Go ahead.
I did a paper in college on stage fright.
Uh-huh.
And one thing I learned that really helped me out in response.
Wait a minute. I'll just give you the mic. Go ahead. Because I know they're taping this.
Yeah, I did a paper on stage fright, and the natural reaction you get there, the response is really a response to excess of adrenaline in your body. You're breathing fast, you're sweating, you feel nervous, and the reason is because the human gets a fight or flight response. Now, normally it works if somebody's getting ready to stab you or shoot you because you're going to use all the energy to react to that threat. But you get up on a stage, your mind, you've already reacted that way, and you got the adrenaline rush going. But then your brain says, hey, there really is no threat. Nobody's going to shoot you. But now you got a problem. You have all this adrenaline to deal with.
And that's a very good point. So what do I do with all this adrenaline? Well, different people deal with that adrenaline in different ways. First of all, don't drink a Red Bull before you go up to give a speech. I decaffeinated myself. That was one of the things. Now, I kind of backslid a little bit from that. You may have seen me drinking Coke here the last few days. But there was a period of time when my stress levels were so high and I was driving myself crazy. I was unemployed and just not in a good place. And I had to stop and figure out what was driving me crazy. And one of the things was coffee. I noticed that when I drank coffee, I started to sweat profusely, and it would just run down the back of my neck, and it was very unpleasant. And it was not in situations of stress. It was anywhere. I'd get up in the morning, and I'm standing around in my pajamas, and I'd drink coffee, and I'd start to sweat. So for a period of about 8 months, I completely decaffeinated myself. And it changed me a lot. I found that I was talking slower. I wasn't machine gunning. My breathing was a little better. My blood pressure went down just a tiny little bit, not a huge lot. It's still high, but it went down a little. So avoid caffeine. If you're going to be public speaking, even if you're a big coffee drinker, big Red Bull user, knock it off about 12 hours before. Because your body, he's absolutely right. Your body's going to produce plenty of adrenaline for this speech. And if you've already got 3 Red Bulls in you and 4 cups of coffee, you're not helping yourself. And you'll end up doing what I do when I have adrenaline on stage, which is I tend, and I don't know if I've done it today, I tend to pull the microphone off the stand, hold it in my hand, and just pace back and forth. And that's how I get rid of my adrenaline. And this is how I work some of it off. As a matter of fact, Tom asked me, he said, are you going to stand behind the podium? Do you want a wireless mic? I said, no, I want to hold the mic in my hand, and I want to pace, because that's how I work off my adrenaline. Again, finding something that works for you. And I'm not going to say this is going to work perfectly every single time from the very, very first time you try it. Because the other thing that helps you remove the fear from public speaking is doing more public speaking. Getting on the horse as many times as you can. It's fear of the unknown in some cases. I've never given a speech before. Sometimes, and it's funny, the first time ever since Sue asked me to do this, I've been thinking back to my experiences with public speaking. The first time that I think I ever appeared in front of a group of people by myself, as myself, was when I was 11 years old and my grandfather passed away. And he was my hero, my absolute hero. And at 11 years old, I had to stand up in front of a church full of 200 people. I don't know. I was so scared I didn't know what I was doing. I'd been on stage many times, and I was absolutely petrified. And it occurred to me that sometimes the first time you're asked to speak, it is in some situation that is stressful in and of itself. Giving the eulogy at 11 years old for the most important one of the most important men in my life. Try and do it other times before that, because then when you get into those situations, they won't be quite as stressful. You'll have an easier time of it. But repetition is always helpful. That's why actors learn their lines. It's why actors rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and get things down to where they know what's going to happen on stage every time, and they're comfortable with it. I've reached a point now where if Sue had walked up to me during breakfast and said, our speaker called in and can't make it, can you do an hour on the fear of public speaking? I wouldn't have been nearly as prepared as I was, and as it was, the only thing I prepared didn't work. But I wouldn't have been nearly as prepared, but I could still do it. And I have been asked to do things like that. I had a situation where there was a variety show that happened here in town, and their master of ceremonies couldn't make it, and they just said, literally at the spur of the moment, can you MC the show for us? And I said, absolutely. And part of that is you do it so many times, over and over and over, that you remove the fear. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, please. Yeah? Go ahead. Wait, say it into the microphone so everybody hears it.
So my fear is that I am not native English speaker, so I'm afraid that people might not understand me correctly, or I might not understand their questions correctly. Mm-hmm. So that's the only fear. So if you can advise me, if you can give me any advice to those, foreign speakers.
I will help. What is your name? Yutaka. Okay, Yutaka asked the question. Does anybody off the cuff know what the answer to that question is? He has a fear of not being understood because he is not a native English speaker. I'll start by saying I'm a Rotarian, and every year the new president of Rotary comes from a different part of the world. And 2 years ago, the president of Rotary International was a gentleman from Korea. And he was very difficult to understand when he spoke. But he just went right out and did his speeches, even and English was not his native language, but he learned his speeches phonetically in English so he could deliver some of them in English. When a room full of Americans hears someone like you speak, there is again, audiences don't want to see you fail. So out of consideration, you'll find that they listen more closely to what you have to say. They take into account that English is not your native language, and they actually pay more and better attention to someone like yourself who is obviously making an effort to speak in their language and making an effort to to converse and do a speech in their language. People actually are, am I right? Yeah. We respect you for trying to learn the language and for learning the language, and therefore we become more attentive.
Well, and I would agree as well. John Chen, who was the CEO for Sybase before SAP took over the company, same thing. You would lean. Everybody would almost be in a situation of leaning into him because he was Asian, so you would not quite fully understand him, but it would just. You might not quite get everything, but you would attempt it.
And another thing I would suggest, at the end of your speech, have a question and answer period, and allow people. So if they didn't understand one of your points, that they can go ahead and ask a question and get more clarification. Yes, Sue.
So what I'm hearing is you have an advantage because people will listen more closely.
That's right. You have an advantage. Another thing, yeah, go ahead. Wait, let me get over here because no, they're taping it, so I want everybody to hear it.
So the second part of my question was, I'm afraid that I wouldn't understand the questions of audience at the the question and answer part. I'm afraid that I might not understand the questions correctly. So that's my second fear.
Okay. Well, again, that goes back to confidence in your audience.
Dave, it was actually Jesse did a very good job yesterday. It's you repeat the question and verify whether or not that is the question. If it's not, you can go back and forth verifying. So if I ask a question, you say, the question was, blah, blah, blah. Was that the question? No, the question was, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was going to say. Again, if you're not sure you understand the question, ask them to repeat it, or repeat it back to them to make sure that you know what they're asking. You know your topic. You have confidence in your subject matter. So if you can get past that barrier of understanding the question, then you're solid, because you'll be able to answer the question with confidence. It even works with people from England, people from Australia, people who speak fine English, but when we hear a trace of an accent, we attempt to boost our understanding. Now, some people attempt to boost that understanding by talking louder. Is this the way to the train station? And they're speaking that to a person who does not speak any English at all. Somehow they feel that speaking louder will somehow make them more understood. Doesn't work that way. There's a famous there's a famous Korean comedian named Henry Cho. Henry Cho was born in Alabama. He talks like this. He does not speak Korean at all. But he and his father went to Korea on a trip. He said, I was used to being the only Korean in Alabama. I'd look up, there was my father. He was the only Korean in front of me. He said, we got off the airport in Korea. I looked up, my father was gone. He couldn't see his father at all. He said, and at one point during his visit, he said a woman from the United States, for whatever reason, picked him out of a crowd, and walked up to him. And remember, he doesn't speak Korean. And she said, is this-y the way-y to the trainee station? And he looked at her and he said, reckon so. Language is always interesting, and you bring up a wonderful point with it. Keeping in mind the rules that I had, that the audience is always on your side, they're going to go the extra mile with you when you speak. And they're going to make an effort to make sure they understand you and make sure they that they hear your point clearly. And I'd say just go up there and do what you do, and don't worry about it. People are on your side, and like I said, if they want you up here, if they invite you to speak, it's because they want you here. They feel you have something to contribute, and that makes your contribution important in and of itself. Should give you a lot of confidence as well. And smile a lot. Any other questions? Yeah.
A comment really, like my biggest embarrassment of speaking.
Oh wait, an accent.
It's a British Australian, don't know.
Yeah,
That's right. I had a friend in the History Society who did a lot of research, and we privately joked to teach research somebody who's left all his speeches, and at the top he'd written, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here this evening, or whatever. We sort of laughed that he'd actually written that out. And when my church gave a farewell lunch for me, I didn't write the bit that said, I'm really glad to see you all here, and I'd like to especially thank the people who put on the lunch, because I wanted that to be spontaneous, and I forgot it.
Yes. Absolutely. That's a great story. Did everybody hear that? What he said was he had a friend who at the top of every one of his speeches wrote out, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be here tonight. And when he was in a similar situation, he wanted a church had thrown luncheon, you said? Farewell lunch for him. He did not write, thank you to the church for this wonderful farewell luncheon, blah, blah, because he wanted it to be spontaneous. And as a result, he forgot it. So, by the way, I want to thank you all for being here today. Thanks very much. But yeah, it's a good thing. If even if you have 3x5 notes like this, like I have these little cards that I printed up, there's no crime to write things on them to remind yourself of things you want to say, especially thanking your host, thanking the organization for whatever it is you're being. Yes?
Just a personal experience with the 3x5 cards. Number them, because you will drop them. And if you have to pick them up, and you're like 2 seconds before go, you can quickly put them back in the order that you want them in. If you number them.
It's a great point. He said, make sure if you use 3x5 cards like I do, please number them. It's funny you should say that, because when I wrote out those cards a few days ago, I had bullet pointed everything. And yesterday when I was reviewing my notes, I thought to myself, what happens if you drop the cards? So I changed, on Word for Windows it's easy, I changed bullet points to numbering. And it's a great point, because that's exactly what I did. If you drop the cards, then it only takes you a moment. You can say, oh, excuse me, I dropped my notes, and you can just very quickly, and the audience will wait for you to do it. It's not like, nobody is going to stand up and walk out because you dropped your cards. They just aren't. I'm here to tell you that a lot of the fears that actors have and a lot of fears that the speakers have are exactly the same fears. I did a show earlier this year called Circle Mirror Transformation. I was the director of it. And the author specifically wants you in certain places to put rather long pauses in some of the dialogue. And that goes against a lot of things that actors talk about. That, you know, keep the pace going, keep it going, you don't want to lose your audience. And the actors were saying, you know, if we stand here and put these long pauses in, people are going to think we forgot our lines, people are going to think this and that and the other. I said, you know what? First of all, the author has seen this produced, and they know that those pauses are supposed to be there, and of whatever length they want them to be. I said, secondly, I have never been in a theater performance where if a person put in what was called a pregnant pause, that anybody stood up and walked out. I mean, really, William Shatner has spent an entire career putting pauses where they don't belong. Anyway, so I'm looking at the old clock on the wall. I see that my time is up. Any quick question to finish up? All right. Yes.
I'll add another comment that the most challenging bits of public speaking in the loosest terms I had was when I got asked to conduct a friend's funeral, and being the UK, it was a half-hour slot, and you don't overrun because the next ones are behind you.
Right.
And equally, if you make a half-hour slot 18 minutes, people are feeling cheated.
Yes.
And I sort of was really nervous about this. What I actually did, which you may or may not think is a good idea, I almost had bus timetable times down on the script. So I just sort of, just need to sort of slow up or speed up.
In that situation, I agree with you 100%. If somebody says, you have 8 minutes, and it's a real strict 8 minutes, in this case it was 30, but, excuse me, you have 8 minutes, and that's all we can give you. In that case, even if you don't want to be scripted, I would suggest that you get your notes together and run it a few times in front of a mirror or just out to the wall in the living room. Run it a few times so that because you will be amazed. The first time you run it, you'll be going so fast that your 8-minute talk will take 4 minutes. And then as you get more used to it, as you get used to putting your own pacing and your own speed into it, you'll get it down to where you'll go, oh, okay, well, I'm at about 7. I need to add maybe a couple of sentences. You would be amazed how little content is required to fill 30 seconds. But if you find you're 30 seconds short or 30 seconds long, usually it's only a matter of a couple of sentences, really. It's not a whole lot. But yeah, in that particular case, what you said, put a running timetable so you know, okay, at the 12-minute mark, I should be about here. That's a great way to do it. And those are the situations, yeah, where you're going to have to bite the bullet and be a little more structured.
I mean, I know for myself, in that sort of situation, I speak at about 120 words a minute. So when I type it out, like...
Yeah, and that's good too. If you know what your natural speaking cadence is, that's always helpful. And after a while, if you do a lot of public speaking, you will find out roughly how much time it will take you to do what you want to do. And I ended up with 22 numbered points that I wanted to talk about, and I figured that would take me about an hour. And by golly, it did. So, thank you very much, ISVCon. It has been an absolute delight to hang with you guys the last 2 or 3 days. And I hope I gave you something to take home with you that wasn't about programming, but that might be also helpful to you in your lives. And my name is Dave Zybert, and thanks very much for coming.